It's really about the business outcomes. And I want you to talk about, the business objectives of the programs you're overseeing and maybe provide an example of how you're measuring them. I realize that pales in comparison to how it impacts a life, as your mom challenged you. That's certainly aspirational. But if we can go down to the mundane just a little bit and talk about the business impacts and how you're measuring those on the programs you're running now.
Sure. So if we talk specifically about my current role, right, we have like broad programs within the data office. We call them key capabilities that we're trying to bring together to enable business in various fronts. So one of the objectives that I can share, the mission of the office is to maximize the value from data, provision fast and seamless access to data that will fuel, our advanced analytics that is used to, make key business decisions across the value chain. So that's a whole lot of words, but that's sort of our mission as a data office. But if you break it down, how does that really impact the business? We have different challenges that were brought to us when the office formed. One of them I can take as an example is we want to use the clinical research data for clinical study data for research purposes. So that is you generate data for a primary use, but it's used exclusively for that use, and there is no consideration of using it for a secondary purpose. That's how traditionally most data processes were built. So our job is to right now to decode why we are not able to share that data. What are the roadblocks avoiding us to share data? It could be related to compliance and regulations. Clinical data has patient data, so it is highly regulated, and it involves complying with various regulations like GDPR, CCPA, and other European laws. So for that reason, we need to understand how can we push ourselves to a point where we're still compliant, but yet unleashing some of the potential of what this data can do for the business. So that's just like one example. And the way we were thinking about measuring this specific use case is, onboarding, understanding how many, studies can be shared with the end users, understanding how many users are actually accessing this data for whatever business purpose. And then third is measuring the number of use cases that are actually using this data. So this is just one example, but you could use the same concept whether you're trying to build a data catalog, whether you're trying to build a master data management. You should always be able to measure the end users usage and the value they are generating using this data.
That's interesting. Hey, look, Sanofi is a very complex and diverse company with even a broader landscape, right? And just piggybacking on what you were discussing right now, like how do you manage, all the consumers that you have that are in-house, right? And kind of, with you can only service so much at one time, right? So how do you get everyone kind of aligned and rallied on priority basis?
Yeah, that's a good one. So it is. Sanofi is really a diverse organization. Just within the research and development business unit, we have 6 functions, and each function has its own complexity. And when you try to stitch all these together with global teams, you can imagine the scale of complexity. The way we tried to build, before we started talking about solutions and prioritizations, the first thing we did was we were trying to draw a chart of how are the stakeholders on what their business roles are, what they exactly do, and started putting together an operating model to engage with all these stakeholders. So I think having a data strategy framework and an operating model are 2 key elements to get this journey started. And we were, fortunately, we were very successful. We got, these business SMEs on board with us in the very beginning stages, explained them our vision on what we are trying to achieve as a data office. And getting that buy-in upfront, has been, really supportive for us throughout this journey. And the way we prioritized is we created a strategic decision-making body people call it like a governance committee, however you want to name it, but pretty much it's a strategic decision making body comprising of leadership from the individual business functions as well as the digital/IT organization. So these folks were the people who were understanding the vision and making the call on the prioritization of the initiatives we proposed. And the prioritization obviously had to come from a baseline assessment that we did. So as part of this operating model setup, we also did a baseline assessment to understand each of these functions at what level of maturity are they at. Some of them are at very, on a scale of 0 to 10, some of them were at 2, some of them were at 5, some of them were at 8. But it was really important for us to understand, where they stand so that we could tailor the solutions accordingly.